So this video is to give a demonstration of the enrolment system. To set up the enrolment forms, you need to go to Preferences and either the student enrolment form or the household enrolment form. So we have two enrolment systems. One is to enroll students and their parents, and the second is to enroll homestays, households, including the primary members and their children, and even referees. You obviously need to have permission to access this page. If you want to see how to do that, access the permissions video. So I have permission to create and edit enrollments here. You can set up several enrollment forms, and again, if you want to create a new one, you just press this plus here, for this video, we will just stick to the standard enrolment form, which you will have a default standard, which will probably be completely blank, so you'll have nothing down here. While we're setting up the enrolment form, it's quite difficult to visualize exactly what the parent is going to see. So we will simultaneously create an enrolment entry. So that is, we are going to invite someone to enroll their children and themselves on this system. And to do that, we're going to go to the enrollments page and create a new enrollment. We're going to use this temporary email. So if we have a temporary email here, and we're going to create a student enrollment. This guy's name is Oni, and we're going to apply the standard enrollment for that person. When we press save here, it brings up a dialog which shows the email that is going to be sent. If there were multiple enrollment emails, we could have we would get a selector here, and we could select a different email to send to this person. So you can customize the emails that's sent out, but that again is the subject of a separate video. So if we press send, then the email is sent out, and the parent will receive an email from the system. And if we click on that, it will look like this. If the parent follows the link on here, it will open up a new window for them. And if we copy the temporary password, the system first of all asks them to set a memorable password. So in this case, we have to use the temporary password, and then we're going to set a memorable password for this enrollment. If the parent needs to come back to the enrollment, they can simply refollow the link, and they can use the password that they set up. If we go to the configuration now on the preferences, and we go to the config tab for this particular enrollment, then you can see that we have various options here, but one of them is to be able to change the welcome message. So if we change the welcome message here, and we just type in hello parent or something in this message, in this box, and save the enrollment changes, then you can see that what the parent will see on the right hand side now just says hello parent. There are a few other things that you can configure here. It is not designed at present to be multi-language, but you can, if you want to, configure the tab labels for children and the tab labels for relatives. We will actually delete those, and so we will have children called children on this, and this is assuming that there is an English-speaking person who is filling the form in. So if we now go to the form on the left, we will be able to see what is actually appearing, and on the right hand side we can see that there is a children menu. So if we go to children menu, the nasty flashing lights are to prove that there are other tabs that the user must visit. So once the user has visited those tabs, we've made sure that they stop flashing. The idea is to take them through the various options. So if we go to the General tab, this tab is always provided by the system. So we always gather information about the name and the gender and religion and so forth for the student. However, you can, on the left-hand tab, adjust the fields that you decide are mandatory for the student. So if I go to the student mandatory fields here, you can tick and cross exactly what is necessary. So if I'm not that interested in a student title, if I just untick that, you'll see that the red asterisk disappears on the right-hand side. So if we do that one more time, if I re-click on student title over here on the right-hand side, you can see there is no asterisk, but now there is an asterisk. If I was to try and submit this form at the moment, obviously it's not complete by any stretch of the imagination, it would tell me that there are lots of missing fields for various parts of the system. And you can decide whether the user who is filling this enrollment form in needs to supply all of those fields. In other words, whether the mandatory fields are actually mandatory. And that setting is on the settings page. So on the settings page, we have this option called Enforce Mandatory on Enrollment Form. And you'll see on the right-hand side, at the moment, it's not possible to submit this form because there are missing fields. And pressing here would take me to those missing fields. But if I untick Enforce Mandatory and save, now on the right-hand side, you can see that the parent could submit with omissions. Obviously, that may or may not be acceptable to you, and you need to decide whether that is something that you want to enforce. So we will enforce it for now. Going back to the student enrollment form here, all of these fields are deemed mandatory that are ticked, and you can set up the fields that you need on the general page, on the contact page, so we gather information about the student's email, communication preferences, and at least one telephone number and that kind of stuff. Indeed, also for the documentation, so this would be passports, visas, and so forth, national ID cards, and indeed on the school. You can set which of those fields the parent or whoever is filling the form in needs to fill in before they can submit the form. Equally, on the Parent tab, which on the right-hand side is shown as the Relatives tab, on the Relatives tab, there are also flashing fields to inspire the person who's filling in the form to visit all these tabs. And again, on the parent side, you can specify which are mandatory fields, or at least asterisked field. And so if on the parent tab, on the parent mandatory fields on the left, if I change title to non-mandatory, then you'll see the asterisk on the right disappearing. Okay, so this is, if you like, on the right, a live view of what a parent would see as they're filling in such a form. Okay, back to the form itself. This is where there's quite a lot of flexibility, and the form itself appears. This is the form for the children. Obviously, the main record that is being gathered here is the record on the children. The contact, documents, and school tabs we've already seen. Siblings is a fairly self-explanatory tab, and you can add siblings as you go forward. And it's the tab on the right that is called Other Details that matches to the form. And this is where you can capture other information about the child as they fill in the form. This would be information that you don't otherwise have fields for on our system. So, for example, whether or not the child plays a piano can be captured because we don't have a piano field as such on our software at the moment. Most of the standard fields that you would expect, name, religion, date of birth, all that sort of stuff, are automatically captured. So the only things that you need to add in Other Details are the additional fields that you need to capture for the purposes of your programs. This will start off blank, and obviously there's an option adding a new line here, but there's also an option on every line on the left-hand side to add a line below. So if I need to add a line below this line, I can create a new entry that will appear below the line that I've pressed the plus on. Delete permanently deletes the entry. So within this form filling program here, you can select various new entry lines, and each entry line appears on the right hand side, and you can see that everything has a tab level. So tab level 0 about your child up here is formatted to the left hand side. Tab level 1 is information that is about your child, and if we had anything on tab level 2, we do. Hit, for example, there is an entry at tab level 2 which is have they got any food allergies, and at the moment that's not visible here, and the reason is because that is actually a conditional field. So if I look in tab level 2, the significance of this field is such that the tab level will look at one level above to get information on a conditional field. So very carefully, this is a conditional field. The please give details about food allergies entry only appears if the person selected yes to the question, does your child have any food allergies? So you can select exactly which fields they have to fill in to be conditional on. So, for example, if I go to how is your child with dogs, we've got likes them, doesn't like them, allergic to dogs, and not bothered. If it was of importance, we could add an additional field below this. We could call it tab level 2, and we could give it a text field. Go through these in a second, but this is a text field. And please give further details. So if you're saying the person is, when they are allergic to dogs, then they need to give further information. So I'm going to capture the phrase allergic to dogs here, because that's the one I want to make conditional. So if I make this second level field conditional, and I put in the conditions allergic to dogs, and save that field, and if they are allergic to dogs, then it's mandatory to fill in that field. So if I save that, on the right hand side, I think I've made a mistake here somewhere. I have to delete this one that I added. And on the right hand side now, that's saved correctly. If I set that my child, when filling this thing, is allergic to dogs, then a further field will appear, please give further details. And that will only appear if they are allergic to dogs. These tab levels are not just pictorial, they are also related to conditional fields as well. On the right-hand side of each of the lines, you can see whether a field is mandatory, which appears with an M, whether it's conditional, so this one is conditional on the one above, and whether it links to a note. Notes and journal entries relating to students are the subject of a separate video, but this is how they are easily captured from parents. So, for example, does your child have any food allergies? If the child has food allergies, then you can ask for details. So if they have food allergies, so this is a conditional field saying yes, then we can link that to the notes, and we can select here in the notes field that any information they type here on this text field, so any information about the child's allergies, will be added to their notes record when the student appears. So there will be an allergies note, because that's one of the ones that has been selected. Those are configurable in the preferences as well. And so if there are any information, is any information to be gathered, so if I press yes on the right hand side, then any data that I typed in here about food allergies would be included in the child's allergy note when it's created. Okay, so we have multi-selectors, we have selectors, and we have section breaks. If I go back to where I was before, the types of entry that you can create are section breaks, which are simply bold entries about that section of the enrollment form. So the section breaks here are about your child, health information, uniform, package. Selectors allow a user, when they're entering, to select one or more items. So do they play the piano? The options here are yes or no. And you can have as many options as you like. You separate them with commas, and you can set up any text that you like. The next option down is a multi-selector. So multi-selectors are where the user can select multiple fields. So here, for example, would your child like to play an instrument? I think perhaps that doesn't need to be multi-selector. That's probably just a selector field. But we can set one up to do with what type of foods they like. So we could set over food, what type of food, types of food do they like, and we could ask specific things. So do they like fish? Do they like pasta? Do they like meat, etc., and so on. And so we can set that up, and if I save that information, then that entry can be, I think I've made a typo there. Let me just fix the typo. Okay. Aha, there it is. What types of food do they like? Okay, that's a bit better. And so that's dynamically going to modify the entry on the right hand side. So here, I can now, if I click here, they can click on multiple entries, so like fish, pasta, and meat. So again, you can gather multiple information about what they like. So that would be a multi-selector. The next option would be a text field, which is, as we've seen, just a text box where they can type in information. You can also gather files. For example, if I add a file selector here, then you can specify on the files exactly how many files they can. So you could limit it to 2 files, and you could ask for, please upload images of whatever it is. And you can ask for multiple files, and then you can also rename those files as they're uploaded. So this of your child, and I'll explain why I'm putting that in brackets in a second. So one more time. No matter what the file is uploaded from the system, it will be renamed as it arrives on in loco parentis, and the files will be called images1, images2, and so forth. And we could make that a mandatory field. Mandatory fields on the right-hand side, again, have a star here, and this is where they would upload that information. So this might be useful for information that is not otherwise gathered by our current system. We already have information on the contact page and the documents page for things like passports and IDs and so forth, visas. But if there are other information about the child, or indeed just images of something that you needed, then you can get them to upload it here. The final thing that you can add here is images which are effectively banners. So this would be a banner image, and I can select from the system here a banner which I could use to break up the enrollment form to make it look a bit prettier. So in the enrollment form on the right hand side, once that image has been saved, and I forgot to give it a title, so let me try that one more time. So once that's been saved, then that banner appears on the right hand side. So you can make the enrollment form look more attractive with banners separating it if you are a designer. So those are the basic types of entry that you can create. Once you've created that image, once you've created that enrollment form, then you can send it out to your parents by, as we've already shown you, entering their data here and the email. Now, of course, this can be used to send to parents. You can also send it, of course, directly to the students if the student is of a sufficient age that they're going to fill this themselves. But you can also send this to agencies, and if it's done as an agency, then an agent is able to add multiple students and indeed multiple parents at the same time. So I think there is a limit of 20 students that can be added on a single enrollment system, but when that comes through, you can see that they have joined various parents with various students, and we'll show you how that works in a second. So this is the enrollment system. This is the guts of it. This is the form that allows you to configure the enrollment image that parents will edit. There are a few more options in here. First of all, you can actually hide some of the entries on the enrollment system. And the reason you do that is, first of all, you might want to get basic data off a student, their contact details, and a few bits of information about which course they're interested in, and so forth. You might not want to overwhelm them with a lot of extra information. Or you might, for example, be doing an interview and you might split the questions that you want to gather from the parents separately to the questions that you want to gather as you do the interview. And so anything that is of that nature, you can simply click Hide on Form. And when you save that, so here, for example, how is your child with dogs, which is this question here, as I save that, it will no longer be visible on the form. However, it's still stored with the enrollment system. And when you look at the enrollment record for the students, because every student has an enrollment tab where you can look through and see exactly the information that was entered when they enrolled. So there's an enrollment tab here with students. But if you select that Hide on Form, then it's not going to be gathered at the enrollment stage. It's going to be gathered maybe in an interview or maybe at a later stage. And indeed, the enrollment system can be generically used to store any additional information that we don't have currently fields for on our system. So this Hide on Form could be used for that as well. If you want to generate, once the enrollment has been created, if you want to generate a PDF with a summary of the data that was entered by the parents, then that is very possible as well. But of course, with all the images and other things on the form, it may be that that form becomes quite complicated, and there is an option here called Page Break Before, which will start this particular entry on a new page. So Page Break Before is to do with breaks in the output PDF from the enrollment system. There is also an item here called Report Code. This it really is for in loco parentis internal use. It is occasionally useful to be able to match information on enrollments with matchings and other reports that we use on the system, and we will use that report code to match various bits of data on reports. But at this stage, it's too complex for this particular video. So that's a summary of the form features. Just a few more here. If you press Preview here, you'll effectively see what the parent would see. You will notice that I was typing things about your child in curly brackets. As the parent enters data on this form, so if I entered the first page and this child was called John, then the Other Details tab will now start to say things about John. So everywhere that it says, how is your child with dogs, it will replace it with how is John with dogs. I think I hid that field, but never mind, let me unhide it. And now that field will come up here, how is John with dogs, how is John with cats. It can be overwhelming to use too many of those, but with judicious use, that can look quite personalized on the form. Similarly, you can have information about gender. So, for example, once we know that John is male, so gender here, we are going to put male, and the information on the enrollment form is automatically saved, so the parents don't have a save button here, so that data is now saved. And again, if we look at the right-hand side, we can see a selector about the piano. Does he play the piano is an option here. And now that the system knows he's male, it will say, does he play the piano? You can decide what genders you want. You can either have male, female only, or you can have male, female, other. And if it's a male, female, other option, then if you want to be completely specific, you can put in curly brackets separated by vertical lines the three options for male, female, and other. So if I now looked on the right-hand side, this message would say, does G play the piano? There are various options on that. There are various pronouns, and if you hover on the left-hand side on the question mark, it gives you a summary of all the special text that is interpreted on the fly. So you can see the details there, or you can ask us. That some of those are quite complicated to use. The preview feature here allows you to set up a test name and a test surname to see whether your form is reacting the way you would expect it to. There are also conditional fields that I didn't go into relating to age, so you can ask different questions for different ages of student and even different genders of students. So if you were gathering, for example, the students' uniform sizes, then you wouldn't be asking hip size of a boy, you would be asking waist size, and again, you can make specific customization of the enrollment form. Once it knows the gender, you can ask the relevant questions, and that's all automated there. Finally, you'll notice the form is banded. This is really to do with when the page is quite wide. If we look at those, it's quite often difficult to see exactly left and right. And so we band these in alternating colors. It is possible, instead of banding them, to control the colors yourself. So in the config on the left-hand side, you can set color types. If you set the color to no color, that's fairly obvious what that does. You'll get a very flat white image, which some people like. If you set it to custom coloring, then yet another field opens up on the form, and you can, on each of these sections, you can color the form. So this would now be a colored section at the top, and that would color that particular line in the thing. So, for example, health information down here, if I can find it. See, section on health information here, I could expand that and set that as colored as well, and then that would break up the form that way. So again, you can configure that exactly as you need it when you get there. So the household enrollment works in a very similar manner. Instead of just students and parents, which is what we've got here, which appear as children and relatives on the, as far as the parent is concerned, on the household, you have 4 sections. You have the household information as well. So this would be the information about the household. So this is the address of the household, gas certificates, insurance, and so forth. Then you have the primary members of the household who are looking after the student. So that would presumably be the mother and or father of the household. You can then set what other members of the household are. So you can gather information on the homestay's children and any other person who lives there. These would obviously not be involved directly in the day-to-day looking after of the pupils, students who came to them, but you still probably need this information to take out DBS checks and the like. And so you can decide exactly which fields you get here. But you're going to need more information about primary members than you would about other members. But things like date of birth is obviously probably quite essential, and we could make that mandatory as well. So here, I didn't have a household field. I didn't have a household enrollment form here, and so it's created a new form for me. I'm going to rename it standard and save that, and there is now a standard household form for this demonstration company. Referees are, again, a third user that are stored with the enrollment. So primary members, other members, and referees. And the referees will be asked for who they're giving a reference for and when that goes out. So these are all the options, very similar setup to the student enrollment form, but these are all the options for household enrollment form. Finally, if I go back to the student enrollment form and the configuration, when the parent finally submits their data, then you get a message that you can send after completion. The default message appears here. You will now be directed to the login page. If that is not what you want, you could type something else in here. So thank you for filling in the form, etc. And you could then decide where you wanted to send them. And so you could send them to back to your website after they filled in the form. As standard, it simply defaults to our login page. Finally, but not the subject of this video, there are ways of linking the enrollment system to our website automatically from your website via an API system. This is not the purpose of this video, but there will be another video explaining how to use the API messaging system to link from one website to another. Now we're actually going to fill in the data about this student and pause the video, and then we'll get back to the enrollment and show you what that looks like when they've submitted the data. Okay, so I've entered some data here, and as a parent, I would follow the instructions on the welcome page, which would suggest that I go to the submit page. But apparently there are two missing fields for my child here. So I click on jump to user, and it colors the fields here in pink, reminding me that this is what I need to fill in. So I'll put his preferred name in as well as Chris. And if I go back to the submit page, I can still see there's one submit. So what's that one? So if I click here, this one is actually on this page, and it's this field. How is Chris with cats? We've decided that's going to be a mandatory field over here, and it's missing, and he likes them. So that's the data ready for the children there. If I had multiple children that I was enrolling, then I would simply press add another child, and I would get a second child record. So if I press add another child, then I would get a completely new tab reminding me that I've got to fill that in. But if I don't need a second child, I am going to delete that child. Okay, if I go to the relatives page now, I think I've got everything entered for the relatives. If I go to the submit, what I haven't entered is a relationship. So the last tab on the parents field is relationships. And this is how you link or tell us what the relationship is between each of these relatives and the children. And of course, in the case where an agent is typing this in, there may only be a partial relationship tree between the relatives and the children. So in this case, I'm going to add a relationship of Chris, and the relationship here is father. And if I start to type that in, it will allow me to enter, so that person is the father. And indeed, this person, Peter, is going to be the main contact as well for the student. Okay, so if I now go to the submit page, there are no errors here, and I have the option to press submit. So if I submit this enrollment, it says thank you for filling the form, because that's where that was the message that I set up. If I press OK, then this is just going to take me to the login page. And on the left-hand side, as an administrator here, I can now look on the enrollments tab, and I can see that that enrollment has been submitted. So previously, the options here are, if I hover over this pen, it tells me this one is being created. This one tells me there's emails being sent, but nobody's actually edited that one. This one again, the email's been sent, but that one hasn't been accessed. This one is actually completed, and I can look at that and see which ones are completed. So here I can now look at all the data that's been created. And if I was looking at this data while the parent was actually online, I would be able to see the parent entering this data live. And it would be quite unwieldy for the parent, but you can actually interact. Certainly if you were on the phone to them, if they were having problems, you can interact with the parent by editing this data live here, and it will automatically update the data that the parent would be editing. So this is actually live data. We suggest you don't do that unless you tell the parent what you're doing, because it would be quite disconcerting. At the top of this page, we have status. You can set a status for an enrolment. So this could be a new inquiry, it could be rejected, and so forth. The options for setting up statuses are in preferences. You can also set up some notes about the student as you go along. So that would be useful information that you can simply create that data as you process the form. I have the choice now. I need to either accept or reject this application, and you can see here that it's been submitted, and we can see that there's one student and one team member. That data is below. So here on the section below, I have a major tab here. It's not entirely obvious what this does. This one is S1, that means student 1. So if I click on student 1, and it was already selected, the one that's selected is shown in red, this is the data that was entered for that student. So I can look through, I can see any bits of information that they've uploaded, I can see their religion and all the rest of it. I can see all the data relating to that student, and I can even see all the information that they've put into the enrolment form. This student is not, however, currently on the student database. If I was to go to the student database, Chris Carpenter would not be one of the students that is listed. So the data goes into a holding database and doesn't get transferred until you're happy and have accepted that data and then explicitly enrolled them onto the main system. So this is the student record. At the top here, it's presenting the information that it's not entirely sure about because it couldn't match it or wasn't sure about matching it. So rugby school, for example, in the school tab, for some reason it hasn't picked rugby school here. I think perhaps because they entered that manually. So if I click rugby school, we're now happy on rugby school. It's warning me that I haven't updated the term information about this student, and indeed I could add the term information there. I'm not going to in this video. It's also the parent typed in not sure for the boarding house. I happen to know this student is going into Kilbracken, so I can put them in there. And there is also information about the sibling. And when I save this record to the database, that sibling information will become visible. They were entered as being in D block for year 11, and if I click that here, I can see that information hasn't been picked up either. So this is now starting to look like a decent student record. So S1, I could accept. I'm going to close up that student record. I'm going to look at T1, which is what we call team member 1. So this is the first team member who came in, which was in fact the father. And I can look at this data here, and I can reject it if there are mistakes. And if I pressed reject at this point here, I could type in a message, which would be the rejection message that would go out. Sorry, but you need to add whatever else. You need to add some information. And if I press OK there, it will then show me the template email that's going to go out. Again, these are configurable, and you can make this look as you would want with whatever links. I'm actually going to cancel that, so it won't send this out, so we haven't rejected this application. So I'm happy with this application, and I'm going to finally accept it. So I'm going to mark the status as accepted, it's completed. And maybe you have other processes in there, such as an interview or a visit pending or whatever. And so I'm going to save that. Once I've saved that information and it goes onto the system, then I can accept it. And what happens is a small green disk appears here. If I select the student and I press this green disk, then it will show me that there is still errors and it can't quite put it onto the database yet. If I hover over this exclamation mark, it tells me that the school date is invalid, and it's giving me an example of the date. So this student is going to start on the 1st of September 21, and that is now correct. I can save that, update that information, try one more time, add record to database, and indeed it has now added it to the database. And if I went to the student record over here, you will see that Chris Carpenter is now there with all the information, including all his enrollment information and so on. The one piece of information I don't think it gathered was the siblings. That was still showing in red, and if I just go to the siblings tab on this student, I can add this data here. So that information was not automatically gathered. So I can copy that information here. His sibling is called Jason, and it's the 2nd of August 19 was his birthday, and it's male. And I could also set myself a reminder that on the 2nd of August 29, I might try and recruit this brother to my agency, and I'm going to save that. So this record is now an exact mirror copy of the database. Anything I change here will be reflected in the database record on the students page, and you can see now that the S1 record is shown in solid with a tick. That means that this record is part of the database. If I do the same for the team member, so this was the father, I'm going to save that to the database. And that has now gone on the database, and so Peter Carpenter will now be part of the community. And Peter Carpenter, at the moment, doesn't have any students. The student record for Peter Carpenter is blank. That's because I haven't added the relationship. So if I click on this third option that has now appeared, we've now got Chris and Peter in the database. If I click here, then this was the information that was presented, and it's trying to enter that data for me. So it's suggesting that I add Peter Carpenter as the father of Peter and make him the main contact, which is all very reasonable, and I'm going to save that. And now that one gets a tick, so I've added all the information from the enrollment onto the database. And if I went to the students and I looked at Chris and I looked at his team, I can see his father is sitting in there. And indeed, he's the main contact. And this will be set up with the default for team member roles, which is in preferences. If I equally look in the community and I look at Peter Carpenter and I look at students, I can see that Peter is the parent of Chris. And so that data has been filled in. Furthermore, if I go back to students for a second, we had information about notes. If information was entered about notes in terms of things like allergies and so forth, that information would be gathered here. So all this note information or medical information is gathered automatically from the enrollment process. So if that data was typed in on the enrollment, then it would be visible here. So that's pretty much a whistle-stop tour of the enrollment. As usual, if there are any questions, please give us a call.